Welcome to an. Oh, wait. Sorry about that, everybody. False start. Hello and welcome to another brand new edition of Culture Reads Live. If you've been able to tune in to some of our past videos, we've been having some ongoing discussions about some of the book studies that have been taking place throughout our community. The way it's been working this season, we normally in the fall have a wonderful event on the City Hall Plaza called Culture Fest. This year, things were a little bit different due to our circumstances, and so we took advantage of this opportunity to have a new book study take place. There were several book studies that have been unfolding over the past few months, and we've been checking in this little video stream podcast thingy. Culture Reads Live. So we're going to do that today. Today we have a fabulous guest with us to talk about the book she's been reading. Hello, Suzie. Carey. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks, Jack.
So good to see you again. I know those of you who've been tuning in for our past episodes, we have been filming in City Hall wearing our masks. For the safety of everybody today, we're going to do this remotely via the interwebs. And so here we find ourselves talking. Suzie, if you don't mind, let's start off with, could you remind our listeners, you selected a book to read for the Culture Reads program. What book did you select?
I'm reading Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility.
White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Thanks for reminding us. We had a couple of opportunities to discuss previously the book study, but I know there may be some people listening today who were unable to listen to those previous ones. So before we dig into the questions I have for you here, would you mind just giving us an indication of how the book study is going for you? Are you doing this with friends or family, coworkers? What's your book study situation look like there?
Yeah, so this one I'm actually doing on my own. The one that our office is doing is how to be an anti-racist, but I chose to do this one myself, and it's really been eye-opening for myself, just really examining kind of your thought processes and yourself and past experiences. And so, I would recommend probably for anybody that's just getting started, doing some of this type of work, this is a good place to start. But, obviously there's a lot of resources out there. So, start here, but, continue on after you get through this.
Marvelous. One of the things I always appreciate about your response there is that I've actually talked to several people who've been a part of this Culture Reads book study. Some people are doing exactly what you have described and just kind of personally reading and reflecting on a book on their own. But then we've also had some situations. You mentioned you've got another study going on with coworkers. I know some people who are doing this with colleagues. And I know some people doing it with their faith community too. So I'm just thrilled to see that people are taking different approaches to study the book. I've got a few questions here that are written down just about the book. The thought here, again, if you're tuning in for the first time to a Culture Reads podcast here, one of the things we do is we just reflect on some of the things that people are learning from their reading. So before I get specific, though, at this point, you've probably either finished your book or gotten close to finishing your book at this point. And so the first few times we talked, you were earlier in the study. Are there any key lessons or ideas that stand out to you at this stage in the journey that you would like to share? Any main ideas, perhaps?
Yeah, I finished reading it. And, I think the one thing that really has made me think is that, this isn't something that you read a book and then you know it all. This is a lifelong process. White socialization is something, that I've experienced my entire life. So, it's not like overnight my behaviors, my assumptions, all of that's going to change just overnight. That, it's going to take intention on my part, to try to, so to speak, rewire my thought process and my learned behaviors and those types of things. So, I think that's the thing that's really jumped out at me, that it's great that we're on this road, but, it's not going to happen overnight. And hopefully, people of color are going to see that we are trying, but there will be times that we're probably going to slip up. And, that's where we have to be willing to listen and learn from when we're challenged, on those assumptions and beliefs. So, I think that's really, kind of where I'm at this point. So, I just, for myself, I just got to keep at it, and I've got to keep learning and educating, and it's going to take work, to make me a better person.
In some ways, I find that answer a bit comforting. Sometimes it can feel intimidating when it feels like we're at the beginning of a journey and we've got a lot of work to do. But the great thing about that is that if you look at this as an ongoing process of just continually learning more and continually broadening our horizons, it can be a little freeing because it gives us an opportunity to continue to learn. No one's expecting anybody to be perfect on day one after picking up a book. So I appreciate that insight. I find that to be very helpful. It reminds me of our annual event that we actually have on City Hall Plaza. We could be tempted to think that being aware of other cultures is something we only do once a year at that one event. Just like with this book study, though, I think we find ourselves uniquely positioned here in Springfield. We can continue throughout the year to learn about our neighbors. So thank you for sharing that. What I have here in front of me, I'm going to read a few questions here. We have some specific questions that have been put together. These are about the book you've read. Again, we have a couple other guests coming up on some later episodes. But I want to just zero in on a few key ideas here. We're going to start to talk here about kind of the tail end of the book. So chapters 8 through 12 is what we're looking at. And again, anybody listening in, the name of the book is White Fragility, and that's by Robin DiAngelo. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. There's a question here I'd like to ask. It says, in these last chapters, the author is talking about white fragility. How would you define white fragility? And then following up from that, if you give us an idea of what that fragility might mean, have you experienced this in your own life? Have you noticed this in others or in yourself? Would you be willing to share some insights about that?
Sure. So, white fragility is that discomfort and defensiveness that a white person feels when we get confronted with information about, racial inequity and injustice. And, it's part of the way we've been socialized. And so, we do what we can to try to protect and maintain and reproduce that white supremacy. And so whenever we're challenged about our assumptions or our behavior, we try to turn things around so that, we're the one that's being victimized or blamed or attacked. And that's kind of what kind of sums up that white fragility. And so, I sat down to try to really think about, some experiences that I've had in my life, where I did something, that kind of tried to make me more comfortable. And so one thing that came to my mind was when I was in 7th grade, there was an African-American girl in my class. And she went to the guidance counselor and she told him that I was prejudiced. And so, I got called down to the counselor's office. And, that's a little intimidating anyway. And, so I think the whole idea, was he was going to, try to help us work through this. And so, I think that, he wanted to, tell me what she had said and then give me my chance, to kind of, give my side of the story. And I don't remember why she said that I was prejudiced or what I may have done. That part I don't remember. I kind of blocked that out. But what I do remember was, how upset I was. And, I felt like, it wasn't true. And I remember crying and, just all of those things that, because by her saying that, she was accusing me of being a bad person, because whenever racial subjects come up, that's what we do. We individualize it and we feel like as individuals, our characters being attacked. And so I think that's how I felt back then. and I mean, it's really hard to like step back and think about those things about yourself. And I might have said something or done something, I just don't recall what it was, but I had all of that white fragility of here somebody's saying something about my character. And that's what it all stems around, is how we behave when confronted with that.
I appreciate that. The way you phrase that, we sometimes tend to take it personally and make it about our own character, and sometimes that sense of defensiveness can kind of add an edge to the conversation. I appreciate you sharing that personal story as well from your past. There's a note here in my script. I'll just mention this just to see if you have something to add there. The tail end of that question about this white fragility idea, it says that there is a connection or some sort of a relationship to this idea of fragility and bullying. This idea of this being connected to bullying in some way. Is this construed in the text as some form of bullying or some connection to that?
Yeah, I mean, she does say that it's a form of bullying. And, I can't remember the name of it. It was a documentary that I had watched. And it was actually a group of men that were coming around, and they were talking about, racial injustice and inequality and those types of things. And you could actually see it happening within the group with, several of the white men that were in it. But, what happens is when we feel like our behaviors and our assumptions are being challenged, we have really strong emotions about that. And, we want to justify, the way we feel, or even maybe the things that we say. And so a lot of times we'll, argue about it, or we'll try to minimize it. Or some people will just shut down. They might leave the room, that sort of thing. And so what white fragility does is, all of these behaviors, when we're feeling challenged, we make the other person, we just make it so miserable for them that, basically they just, don't even try to go there, because they can't get anywhere. And so they just never bring the subject up again. And so, we've got to get past that if we're actually going to be able to have those authentic conversations and relationships, with, cross-racial groups, because, that's the only way that we're going to be able to come together and, really try to heal and make changes.
Very, very helpful. Thanks for that insight. I've got another follow-up question here related to the text itself. Of course, I always appreciate hearing your own personal experience and insights as well, but this pertains to the text itself. The question here says, in the last chapter of the book, D'Angelo, that's our author, suggests, has some ideas there for continuing in the work of anti-racism. Would you mind sharing, are there any key takeaways, some ideas or suggestions that the author shares about continuing in the work of anti-racism? And to follow up with that, are there any things that you personally are hoping to do in terms of some additional steps to take?
Okay. Yeah. So she basically, what she's recommending is, like, we have to change our whole racial patterns. And so, some of the things she said that we can do is, one, we need to take the initiative, and we need to find out on our own, about systemic racism and these types of things. We don't need to burden people of color to do that work for us. There's plenty of information out there. There's books, there's websites, there's different, documentaries and films and all kinds of resources that, if we do a little bit of work, we can view and read these things and learn on our own. And one of the other things she suggests is that we start demanding that this type of information be included, in the high schools and colleges, and not just be an elective course, that a student can take. That, it really needs to be part of that, curriculum and learning process. I'm 54 years old, and, I'm doing it now. I mean, it wasn't something that we did when I was in college or even in high school. So, you know, if we don't start learning about these things formally, then things aren't going to ever change, and our thinking and assumptions won't change. So I thought that was a really good suggestion too. She also suggests we could get involved with multiracial organizations, or we could get involved with organizations that are doing social justice type of work. And then she suggests, that we really try to build authentic cross-racial relationships, and, be willing to watch and listen and learn from the people, that we're building relationships with. So I thought she had some really, really great ideas there. And, I think, you know, some people are not going to like what she has to say, and that's okay. There's a lot of other people out there that have done a lot of research and observation and study, around anti-racism and white privilege and white supremacy. So, you know what? If you don't like what she has to say, find someone else, because when it really comes down to it, I mean, this is important. It's important for all people that, we can all be treated equally and fairly, and have the same advantages in life. So, I think that it's really important. Just if she turns you off, then fine, find someone else, but don't stop doing the work because of one person. And so for myself, I want to continue to learn, and I want to continue to challenge, my assumptions and my behaviors in the ways that, I may be contributing to racism myself. So, that's what I'm hoping to do as I move forward with this. And then really work on building those, cross-racial relationships. I do have relationships with a number of African American people, but I think I could work more to make them stronger and better. And so, I need to do the work on myself, to get there.
Suzie, as we've talked in the past couple of months on these little podcast episodes, I've noticed a few common threads in your responses, and one of them, it always comes back to this idea of persistence, this idea of you as a person individually doing what you can and sticking with it. And then if I were to add to that, based on what you've said today, another common thread that I hear is this idea of opening yourself to new perspectives and to listening to different voices. I appreciate that you pointed out that this is not the only book that's out there. This might be one resource you can use, but there might be some additional ways that we can continue to grow and learn. I so appreciate your time. Those are the questions that I had that were planned here. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any concluding little remark, any sort of final exhortation you want to give to any listeners who might be interested in pursuing some study on this topic?
I personally feel like it's worth your time and the effort. And, I think for myself, it really opened up my eyes about a lot of things that I didn't know about. And, I'm sorry that for myself that, it took seeing visually what happened to George Floyd, to spark that want to change myself and to change our world. It shouldn't have taken that long, and it did. And, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, and I'm ready to learn. I'm willing to listen, and do what I need to do, to make it better. So, that's what I'd say. Don't ever think it's too late, to start learning or investigating, because it's not. I mean, it's the way we're socialized, and so it's been set up that it's going to stay consistent. The status quo is going to stay there, and that's what we have to fight, is that we are trying to break out of that. So, I think it's just really, if you care about it and you want to make that commitment, then you're going to do it.
An important, encouraging word there from Suzie Carey. Thank you, Suzie, for your time and talking with me over these couple of past months here as we were looking through our Culture Reads podcast episodes. Thanks so much. I appreciate all your time and attention on this matter and also the work you've done behind the scenes to help bring about this project. As we conclude our little episode here, let me give a few reminders to our listening audience here / viewing audience. You might be watching this online. You might be listening in somewhere. It's not too late to get involved. Of course, as Suzie has just reminded us, you can become involved in numerous ways. You might just find a book on your own and start reading. But as far as our Culture Reads 2020 project is concerned, there are some other ways to get involved. For example, our generous sponsors have made some copies of the books available at our local library, the Clark County Public Library, our main branch downtown. When I say books, what I'm referring to is our Culture Reads Committee selected 3 titles that were all on the topic of anti-racism to some extent. And so those specific books that have been selected by our committee, there are some copies available at the Clark County Public Library. You'll want to contact them to see if they might have some available. If you would like to read one of those books, you might decide to organize a discussion with some friends or some colleagues. Quick note about that. If you go to the Clark County Public Library, keep in mind that the Culture Read books are being held separately from the main collection of books. You'll want to specifically reference the Culture Reads books. These are separate from the general circulation. You can find these books by talking with the library staff. And one other reminder, I believe our local library is doing curbside service right now because of the COVID-19 situation. So you'll want to call ahead to ask about that. A couple more ways to get involved. Let me tell you, you can find everything you need to know by going online. If you want to learn about upcoming online discussions that will be taking place, the goal is to have some conversations with one another, to hear from others who are reading the books. You can learn everything you need to know by visiting springfieldohio.gov/culturefest. Once again, that was springfieldohio.gov/culturefest. That's the page where you would typically find out about the Culture Fest event that happens each year. But they have put all kinds of wonderful resources there. There you can find links to our past podcast episodes, also information about the books and ways that you can get involved. As we conclude our episode, I would be remiss if I did not thank our generous sponsors. I would like to thank the wonderful sponsors we have for Culture Read 2020. That includes the Springfield Foundation, First Energy Foundation, Southfield Village Apartments, the Clark County Public Library, and of course, our fair city of Springfield. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks again, Suzie, for your help in our podcast. We will see you next time with another brand new episode. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Wear your masks. We'll see you next time.